Thank you very much for coming today. And I want to say a special thank you to my family who have been incredibly supportive through this whole process. And actually, who number most of you who are here, so thank you very much for that. And that, I mean, by the extended family as well. Some of the leaflets that went out were delivered by Toby on a scooter. My sister, who was walking back from dinner one night at 10 at night and putting leaflets into letterboxes all around Cheltenham. David, who was posting posters up in the ferry terminal, and Jack, who designed all of the leaflets, all the posters, did my website. You know, and I'm probably going to leave somebody out at the risk of doing that. I'm sorry if I have, but you've been incredible, so thank you. The Depot staff have been incredibly amazing, and we were just saying before, Lucy, who's just come up from Wellington, and myself, have both said exactly the same thing, and not realising that as soon as you walk into this space, you feel like you've found your home, your artistic and spiritual home if you're an artist. And for me, that was exactly it. I left art school with the intention of putting a proposal in, and hoping for an exhibition at some stage, maybe this year, if they liked my work enough. And it wasn't just that, it was the welcome that I received from the staff, it was the encouragement. Every time I sent an image in, it was the support, it was this positivity that I got every time I came to a meeting. Just when you walk in the door here, the volunteers that make you feel so welcome. So I've not experienced anything like that in any gallery I've ever visited. And the locals who say when you move to Devonport, you've got to go to the depot. Catherine, it was one of the first things Catherine said to me, go to the depot. Our home handyman said, you've got to go to the depot. So, and I can see why. And Linda, you and your team, and I know I said it 3 weeks ago, but I'll say it again, it's just been the most incredible experience. And that was back then, and now I've had nearly 3 weeks of working in the gallery with your team, seeing the musicians coming in and out every weekend. Just the whole atmosphere is just fantastic. And I want to do more here, so you know, you and I are going to talk about that. So today though is about an artist talk, which I haven't given since I was being critiqued at art school. So for me this is a little bit different. You know, I'm not being critiqued by lecturers, I'm giving a talk about my work in the context of what they prepared us to do. And when I used to speak, it was in a corporate sense, and of course you know that my background is corporate, so I'm now bringing that corporate background into my artistic practice, which for me is brand new. So today I'm going to talk about intention, and the intention behind my work, and that is what architects do as well. When they design buildings, they have intention for their work. I'm also going to talk about the principles and the processes that I use with my work. And I'm going to talk a little bit at the end about the ideas and plans for future work. And then through all of this, please ask questions, because it's kind of not that formal. And I'd really like you to talk to me about anything that you observe or questions that you might have, and I'll try and answer them. But I'm not an architect, and lots of people have asked me if I'm an architect. And I imagine they are not architects because they wouldn't ask me that question. So this work, as a body of work, has been designed as a full body of work. And it's about how people experience their spaces. And so the background to it was getting to my graduate exhibition at Wycliffe, coming into November. We were being pressured, all of us, to really be clear about the intention for our final body of work. And it's hard. You are being forced into thinking, what am I going to leave art school with? And I had this sense that it needed to be something that I could bring from my past into my future. And it became the building, this one here, that I had worked in, which I retired from. And so when I left work, I retired as head of planning at Telecom. And I worked in this building, and I worked in its sister building in Wellington, and it's actually now known as the Spark Building. It is a fantastically designed building, and it's made up of 4 towers, and it's in Victoria Street West. And those white walkways link the building. And I'd always worked in there thinking, what a neat place this would be to paint. And so that was my attempt at painting that space. But the more I painted it, the more I realised that I wanted to declutter the building, and I wanted to leave it open to the feeling that you got brought into the space when you were looking at it. And so my intention as an artist wasn't to be the architect of the building, it wasn't to do anything with it, it was just to be an artist looking at the space. But from someone who had worked in the building, to encapture something or encapsulate something of the feeling I got when I worked in that building. And in preparing this artist talk, I thought, yeah, it's interesting to capture that from a person who's worked in a space, but I think that there's something architectural that does need to come into what the intention is when architects design their spaces. And so I did look for something on YouTube, now that we can use YouTube because we're suddenly in this wonderful place called Depot that has fibre broadband, and John and I are just like, oh my god, we're actually entering the real world. So we can watch YouTube, and there's a whole story behind that, but I won't go into it. I will go into it. I used to roll out broadband for telecom, and yet we couldn't get it where we lived, so now we've got it. There is an architect, a German architect called Ole Scherer, and he designs massively contemporary, beautiful buildings throughout the world. And when I looked into his work in Singapore, he designed a building called the Interlace. I don't know, David or Catherine, whether you remember seeing it. And it was a residential apartment block that instead of going up to create stacked building where people didn't know each other when they go up in their lifts, it's actually an eco building that brings tunnels of air through it, that sucks up, and it's got pools, that sucks up the cool air off the pools and redistributes it around these interlaced blocks of buildings. And it makes people feel like they've got neighbours, and so it's designed to actually make people feel like they're living in a resort complex rather than in a high skyscraper. So from a residential perspective, and from an aesthetic perspective, but also from an eco-friendly perspective, he's, with one of his counterparts obviously, he's designed this beautiful building. From a corporate perspective though, he also designed a building called the Loop in Beijing. It's the biggest building ever designed to date in Beijing. And what he wanted to do for the experience of the 10,000 people that work in this building was think of it as an ecosystem like the body. So where the body, everything connects, it's a television broadcasting building actually. He wanted it to work like the body does, where the blood goes round and our digestive systems work. He thought that in television and broadcasting there needed to be an interconnectedness. So the loop goes round and up and down again. And David's looking it up on his phone. I chose not to use a data projector because I thought that might be too corporate for an artist. But it's a loop, and it's one of the biggest buildings ever built to date, and it is the most amazing building that has a crossover point, comes down, across and back up again. And the whole intention behind these two buildings was to feed the experience of the people that work in these buildings. But what I was really impressed at when you hear this guy talk is that they cut out 10,000 little sticks to the scale of the building to see what it would be like for the 10,000 people working in the building so that they were to the scale of the building. So it's incredible to think about what architects actually do when they're thinking of the people in the buildings. Conversely though, when I think about some of the buildings I've worked in, and I have to say, some of the older public sector buildings that I've worked in, and I used to have a background in change management. One particular project I was involved in, we really needed to change the culture, but it was never going to work in this particular organisation, in the space that we were in, and it was like gliding on. And you walked in and everyone was walking around like this, and the buildings, walls, they must have had it dating back to the days when you could smoke inside because there was nicotine all over the walls. The kitchen had probably 30-year-old coffee stains still on the wall. The kitchen was filthy, and I remember not even wanting to have anything to do with the kitchen. And we were there to change the culture and change the whole ethos of the organisation. And it was a really important change management project because it was about making people's lives safer. Couldn't do it. We tried to facilitate people to get them to actually be energised by this new change that was coming into their lives, and we couldn't do it. That organisation, though, has now moved buildings. In fact, they've moved departments because the government couldn't actually get this culture to change, and I'm not going to talk about who they are.
Got a nice hair dryer, don't you?
And that leads me into the art. So the body of work that you're seeing has been designed from a narrative perspective. So we were taught in art school not to tell people the stories behind the works, but I do think that it's important to give you a hint at what's sitting behind the work, because I can tell you about architect stories and what they design, but that doesn't relate to the art.
Why? That's greatly intriguing, because as not an artist, I like buying artwork, I like engaging it. And what I valued most of the last 10 years is the artist who tells me something of their intention, their story, I engage the artwork, I buy it. So why is it that these tertiary institutions so inculcate within you such an attitude that's such a barrier for us to engage with your work?
So I don't know. I think that it's about allowing the viewer to get their own meaning from the work.
Yeah.
So I used to be an abstract artist. You'd very much struggle to tell somebody the meaning from an abstract piece of work. So in that context, I do understand it. But in my context with my work, I feel like you need to understand where I'm coming from with this, because I'm not an architect, and architects do show work like this. It's become really apparent when I've done my research that they may not paint it, but they certainly show the architectural drawings, and they really have intention for their work when they show it, like particularly in places like MoMA. So maybe they're not showing it though from an experiential perspective. Like when I'm showing this, I am wanting you to experience emotion from the work. But I don't want to tell you what your emotion should be, and I think that's where the tertiary institutions are coming from. So, and there's been a lot of reactions. It's been neat being here for 3 weeks, because I've heard people respond to the work and what they think they are feeling when they're responding to it. So I shouldn't be telling you what you should feel emotively in responding to the work, but I really feel like I want to tell you a little bit about the work. And I didn't know till I went to art school about how to read work. So it is a tough one. It's kind of that like fine line between giving you enough information and then allowing you to take it further. But there was a lady on the front desk this week who had a gallery for 21 years in the Caribbean. And I asked her what I should do, and she said give people the information, because she felt that, like you, if I don't give you enough information, you'll just look at it from a visual perspective and you won't understand. Like there's layers and layers of meanings that sit behind things when it's done from this perspective. So I'm going to give you that information. Others may not. So taking it from that one, when I came to see Robin and the team, I brought that work in because they asked me to, because this work doesn't relate well to being seen on the web. Please come in. They don't want to. And it kind of needs to be seen in the scale that it's seen, and Robin has hung it because it's so beautifully hung. She curated the body of work really, really well. When I came in and saw it hung, Robin had read the work incredibly well, because that's her talent as a curator. What she had done, and actually I moved from that to this, she had read the works in what they taught us in art school, which is the dialogue. So all of this work is talking to each other. And so what I have done is I've painted the people that work in the spaces. And so when I worked in the IT and telecommunications world, and even when I left, possibly there were more women working in the environment, but not that many more, especially in senior leadership positions. And Robin read that so well. When I walked in, I just cried, because I went, she read it, you know, and she placed those works so well that she's just grouped it so well, and it was just so neat for me to see somebody actually understanding what I was painting. And I'd not seen that work together, I'd just painted them as individuals, knowing what was in the meaning of them when I was painting them. So we have here a group of people, and we have open language, closed language, we have the traits of people getting ready to present, to meet, to go and do things. You know, they're action paintings, but they're also anonymous. And this is how I saw the corporate world in the time that I was in it. You know, it's the suit still. It can be more casual, but I finished painting with this particular image here, and the titles are quite important. So this one is called She Waits. And then when I carried on painting from that one, I painted, I'm not showing you these in any particular order, I painted this one. And actually I'd like to ask you guys, what do you think this work's about?
I totally get that in relation to She Waits and the glass ceiling and, you know.
Yeah, Lucy would get it.
I get that. That makes a bit straight to my experience. Amazing, makes me want to cry actually.
So that glass ceiling is there, but you know, it's kind of like, so I chose images, like I spent ages choosing images, but I also chose the images because I really like the images as well. It wasn't just because they were speaking a message, but I really wanted light and dark and shadow and perspective and angles and structures, and I wanted to challenge myself with technical challenge as well. So that whole thing, you know, She Waits and that glass ceiling speak to each other. You know, and she's just like, there's just that going on. So, and sky and what that might mean. So that painting has a lot of meaning. Also, I worked for that organisation on and off for a number of years as a consultant and a contractor. It speaks to the earlier story I was telling you about the change management, and that particular organisation now works in that space, and they're doing really well as part of that new organisation. But they weren't going to do so well if they stayed where they were. And this, you probably can't see it because we've got this one here, but this is also an old Art Depot building, and it's part of an old building of an organisation I used to work for as well. And there's a new building that's been built, and they've brought them together and they've put the glass skywalk across to join the two. And the chief executive is one of the few I've ever worked for that I have tremendous respect for. And so, you know, all the time I was painting that, I was thinking about all these things, you know, and there are still good people in the world, you know, there are still great chief executives out there that I really admire and respect, and he is one of them. Great leadership, and he might make a few mistakes here and there, but he's a good guy. And so all of that is in that painting. And then also when I've been painting, I've been thinking about, you know, we've come to and we live now in Devonport, and you know, there's some industrial complexes here, and probably less emotively, but there's spaces where people come to socialise and innovate and collaborate in corporate buildings. So when you think about that corporate space, and this work is about corporate space, but there's lots of other spaces that I am going to paint about. There are two book paintings here that come from North Shore and Smales Farm in particular. And this one over here is from Smales Farm. And it's also a telecommunications company. So I really liked that image for that purpose, but I also liked the fact that it's up and down, and it gives you the sense of you have to stand back from it and figure it out. It's again, light and dark, it's shadows, it's ascending and descending, it's got all of those elements in it. I also worked for the chief executive of that particular company at one point in my career. So all of these paintings have got a human connection in them for me. This one here, when I chose this image, there was a practical reason. I needed to get an image that was going to fit in this particular landscape. But it's also one that's in Smail's Farm, and I really quite liked the idea, now that we were in Auckland, to actually start picking up the contemporary images in Auckland. And it was quite funny talking to the New Zealand Herald reporter, Atkinson, and he said to me, you seem to have found some really interesting buildings in Auckland to paint. He said, I can't find any good architecture at all. And I'm going, well, actually, they're really neat architecture, you need to go and look around. And so this is an insurance company, and this is not finished, but I was just saying to Chris earlier, this could, if I go too far with this, I could actually spoil it, because I actually am quite liking it not too finished. So I'm going to have to think about where I take it. It's almost like the painting itself is evolving, and I think it's a lot about how I'm feeling in this space. It's just kind of doing its own thing really here.
Can I ask you, did that happen with any of the other pictures? Because the construction lines you've got there are beautiful, and I was thinking before, architectural drawings are so beautiful, part of that line of construction, what's going on here is just lovely. Did that happen with any of the other paintings?
Probably less so. I think I was trying more with the other ones.
Yeah.
This one's just kind of happening, because I think it is that whole feeling of being relaxed in the space here.
Yeah.
I think that's a lot to do with it, Linda.
Yeah. It shows a whole lot of relaxation of the process.
Yeah.
And showing the process, which is fascinating. It's what I was saying, showing the words behind it. It shows the thought process into it. It gives us something that's important as well.
Excuse me, do you mind if I take a picture of you with the half-finished painting for you, not for anybody else?
Oh, absolutely.
Because what you mentioned there, you don't know when it's finished. I can tell you, I never know anything. It's too bad. So I've learned over the years to take pictures of paintings which should have stayed back there. So just stand back a bit, Jen, just near the light, but just keep talking.
Another interesting thing about this work, Janet, is that you paint it and you've been in the gallery, and it's not like a private studio, because you've been subject to numerous conversations of many different types, from sort of dealing with social needs to dealing with, interesting characters who are just wanting a conversation, people who are really interested in the work. But you've worked with that work through quite a number of interruptions, or you could call them interruptions. But have they been interruptions, or have they facilitated the process?
I think they've facilitated it.
Yeah.
Yeah, as I said to you, I mean, I've got this wonderful little space at home, but I'm going to miss being here. It's been fantastic. Yeah, really has. And we've had some really random people. It's been quite random, but even on the weekends, I don't know if many of you know, there's a big sound recording studio in the back here, and the musicians have been coming in and out, and that's been great, and it's just been a fantastic experience. So yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how long I've raved on for. What's the time like? Are you all
Straight.
right? Am I going? You want me to keep going?
Yeah, we're enjoying it.
Yeah.
Do you paint from photos or do you
Yes.
sketch?
Yeah. No, I don't sketch. So I was about to talk about my processes, so I can do that if you're interested.
Yeah.
So the process I use is to paint by eye, and I will tell you this thing if you're interested. I had a fight with the lecturers at my school. I wasn't very good at drawing, and at that stage, and I knew that I wasn't going to get better if I didn't draw. But they at that stage were saying, you're being marked, so you better use a data projector or an OHP. And I thought, well, I'm at school, I'm here to learn, so if I don't keep on drawing and getting better, if I give in to the OHP or the projector, I'm just never going to get better, because once you give in, then that becomes the way that you draw. and it was quite a big fight. But I just kept on saying, this is what I want to do, and I did get better. And I said to them, I don't want to use pencils or charcoal because I found that it was getting in the way of the looseness with the paint. So this is what I do now. That's all these yellow lines here, that's what I draw with. And I just make up an ochre with the paint, which I use 6 colours, if you don't count white. I don't use black, I mix it up. I can tell you the colours. They are, you see, I've written them down. Ultramarine light, poppy red, citron yellow, which I don't use very much of. Yes, we will. And I've found that all of these, that's the only colours I've used. And the only medium I use is just linseed oil. I don't use tubes, I don't use solvents, because I don't really want anything to mix in with what I'm using. And as any oil painter knows, that's it. That's all you've got in your oil paint is linseed oil. And so it took me a long time though to work out what the viscosity was that I needed to work the paint, because you get drips if you haven't got it right, depending on the temperature. So you need to really know how your paint is going to work in various temperatures. And this is one thing I'm very grateful, and I'm actually grateful to the art school for a lot of things. They were really vehement, use the best supports that you can afford. And so at one stage I was using very cheap canvases because I was thinking I'm just at art school, and they said no, use the best you can afford. So I went out and got Belgian linen and cedar supports, especially for these big canvases. Cheaper supports can't cope, and I was getting bowed canvases, and they were sitting out from the wall, and it was just a nightmare. So these are really, really good canvases. I get them stretched by Dean at Studio Art Supplies, and it just, it just makes a huge difference.
Very expensive though.
Yeah, well, they're getting cheaper the more I buy.
What is a large canvas like that cost?
Well, it started off at $900,
Wow.
but now they seem to have gone down to about $6. So, they are giving me a discount now. But, yeah, they are expensive for this size. So,
was there any science behind the colours you just read out, or was it just something that you liked?
yeah, they're warm and cool colours, so they offset each other. They're complementary, there's enough complementary colours in there, and I have experimented right through the end of the last semester in art school to get enough of the right kind of colours that would work for the colours I need for the contemporary architecture paintings, because it tends to be that these are the colours that you need for that corporate space.
Yeah.
I haven't talked about those two paintings, but I can tell you that one there is a bank. Very vibrant colours. That citron yellow is not overly vibrant, but that is actually true to the colour that they've used. And that big, it's a hot desking environment, so I didn't bother putting the plugs in. And the other one around the corner is the Owen Glen building at the Auckland School of Business. So if anyone knows that building, Margot, who works here, used to study in that building, and she said it used to sway in the wind.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so you wouldn't want to be in Wellington in that building, I'd say. It's swaying in the wind here. The only other thing I would say is that I'm not into hyperrealism, so these are not meant to be perfect examples or perfect copies of the images. They are drawn by hand, and I allow for mistakes. I try not to have mistakes, I really don't want any, so I really want perspective to be correct, but I know that there are mistakes in them, but that's the whole point of a painting. It's the artist holding the brush, and having worked in the cyber world for so long, I don't want to be photoshopping, I don't want to be mucking around, I've got Jack for that.
It's about mistakes. So I look at that one and abstract artist in that, because you've taken all those shapes and lines and whatever those pipes and everything are that you see in the, you know, and you've made pattern and you've made shapes, and I don't think it's about, not being true to it, you're just seeing it as almost an abstract position, always what I see in there, and it's lovely.
One of the meanings of abstract is to take from, whether it's photography or real life. Abstract means to take from. It doesn't mean to say it's nothing.
No, that's
It's
true.
always taken from something
Yeah,
through
it is.
and
That's right. It's your interpretation.
Yeah, and that's probably what's coming through. It's like the little cropping in, the taking from. I like the props. I do like that aspect. So just to finish up, I'm very keen to continue working with the Depot in some aspects and show again, and I'm definitely encouraging the artists to do that. And I think, David, you're the same. You've had some great success here. There are collaborations that I'm thinking about working on, and a couple of residencies that I've applied for. And also I'm doing a group exhibition here in Devonport with the Flagstaff Gallery in October with two of my classmates from Wycliffe. And that will be, I'm looking at buildings in Devonport to paint for that particular exhibition. And I guess at some stage, I'm not sure yet, but I might do some more study, and I might encompass that idea you and I were talking about, to do that actually thinking, which is to look at buildings through the eye of an artist, but that underlying architecture and how that gets encapsulated. Any more questions then before we wrap up? I'm just aware I'm taking a lot of time. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Karen.
Before Janet departs the podium, we'd just like to say that the feeling has been mutual. Having Janet here has been a real delight for us, and to have ongoing conversations about work, and to have the presence of an artist in the gallery has been marvellous. And Janet's also been a part of the feeling of the Depot as well, because you know, we do regard ourselves as really inclusive, and Janet's been so welcoming to everyone, answered the curly questions and the irrelevant questions, the questions that have nothing to do with her art. But it's just been really great. So we've loved the experience, and we just really, as a result of it, want to encourage it more, because I feel it does actually change the nature of our process, the nature of the work, and for me, seeing this work happen, it's been a really interesting, although it seems so meticulous, it seems an incredibly organic process that's been taking place as well. So yeah, thank you, Janet.
It's plenty more wine here.